Stray by Niko. Summary. Izuku didn't know what to do. His mother was dead, killed by a villain attack, and he had no idea what to do. At least this alleyway was closed off from the world. Maybe he could get a few hours of sleep. Waking up with a cat in his hair, that was not something he expected, nor did anything else that followed. Follow Izuku's journey as he gains a cat army, a family, and the spot as a number 2 vigilante and eventually a hero. Sorry this summary is shit, but oh well. This is a prequel to the rest of the fics in my Cat Army series. This can be read as a standalone, though. Chapter 1. Shock. Keep running, Izuku thought to himself. Don't look back. Just keep running. Izuku didn't know how long he was running for, just that his feet felt like lead and his lungs were on fire. He was still in shock. He knew that it was common for this situation. Finally stopping in the darker part of town, the reality of what was done had finally hit him. His mother was dead, killed in a villain accident at the hospital of which she worked. Izuku had heard the scene, and simply ran. He knew that he'd go into the foster system, and for a quirkless kid, it would never ended up well. Now, though, he wished he'd stay. Being in the foster system would be better than being homeless. He was going to need to get a job to feed himself, but then again, who would hire an 11-year-old, especially a quirkless 11-year-old? Wiping his tears away from his face, he tried to collect his thoughts. He needed a place to sleep. He barely had anything with him, just his backpack, which contained a notebook, his homework, and a few pens and pencils, a sweatshirt, and what he had been wearing when he ran. An alleyway would be nice, some place to tuck behind and sleep in. Who was he kidding? He wasn't going to be sleeping anytime soon. He wasn't going to school anymore. He didn't think he could handle it. Maybe he could take online classes at the public library. That seemed like a good idea. Finding an alleyway, it turns out, wasn't that difficult. He wandered around for about half an hour before he came to a semi-secluded one with 2 dumpsters that he could easily tuck himself in between. He curled upset between them with his backpack still on, not wanting to take the chance of it possibly being stolen. As he slowly drifted off into unconsciousness, the events of the day tiring him out more than anything, he had one final thought: how am I going to feed myself? Waking up was rather an experience. His body was stiff and cold, and his neck hurt from sleeping the way he had been. As he slowly started to stretch himself out, he became acutely aware of an animal that was curled up in his hair. Freezing in place, he tried to calm down. Is it a rat or a mouse? He thought to himself as he slowly stood up. Deciding on a course of action, he shook his head forward. A small animal went flying towards the ground, and he caught it without a second thought. It was a cat, a small black cat with white feet and almost a lightning streak on its back, to be exact. "Aw," Izuku said before he could help himself, forgetting that he was homeless. "I think I'll name you Shock." You can come back home with me. Mom should. Mom should. Cutting himself off abruptly, Izuku blinked his eyes in an attempt to stop the tears. That's right, he whispered. Mom's dead. We won't be going home, Shock. That's okay. You can live with me, and we can keep each other company. Now let's go try to find money. With that, he tucked Shock back into his hair and started walking in hopes to find some sort of miracle. That miracle came in the form of the trash-filled beach, Dagoba Beach to be precise. Honestly, Izuku didn't know how people could throw all this stuff away. It hadn't even been an hour, and Izuku had already found 2 wallets, which both have him a grand total of 14,000 yen. That should be enough to buy him a small bit of food, and and will some well as some for Shock. Looking around the trash beach, Izuku couldn't help but think of the future. Looking around the trash beach, Izuku couldn't help but think of the future for it. He didn't have anywhere to go. The Bakugos might take him in because they had been good friends with Inko, but he didn't want to have to live with Katsuki. This beach, he said, speaking to Shock, would be perfect. I could probably build some small house for us, and nobody ever comes here. Not to mention, I might be able to find a way to make money from here. How much do you think scrap metal will sell for? Izuku hummed before setting himself to work, finding the materials to build a small shelter. Honestly, finding the materials to build a small shelter honestly wasn't that hard. He noticed a van sticking out of the pile when he first got there, and he could already tell that it would be useful. Looking over it, he could tell that it was perfect. Only the front part was sticking out. The other side windows were blown out, so it wasn't hard to get into. The front seats were missing, so the van was completely empty, which was fine by Izuku. He could find some way to make a small bed for himself in the back, as well as maybe some shelves and a place for Shock. He definitely would need a place to keep food as well, unless he wanted to grow his own. His mother had taught him how to garden as a way to help him calm down, not to mention it was good bonding time. Izuku winced. He didn't know if he was willing to do their activity by himself, especially so soon after that. He might have to, though, as unwilling as he was. He knew his mother would want him to move on, to do whatever it took to survive. Shelves, he thought. First things first. Let's make this thing into something livable. It turns out, unsurprisingly, that there's a lot of things in the trash beach that can be used to make a small van into a, small van you can live in. He was able to find a cat tree for Shock, though he did plan on cleaning it first. Oh, how could I be so stupid? I'll have to clean this place up first. It's disgusting inside. Izuku set, which set Izuku into his next operation, cleaning, which ended up being surprisingly easy. It wasn't exactly dirty inside. There was a lot of glass, which he was able to pick up. The sides, the floors, and the ceiling need to be scrubbed down. There were many rags that have been thrown away. Izuku sat down, looking over at the waves. The sun was starting to set, and Izuku was tired. Lugging things all around all day was strenuous work, especially on his 11-year-old body. Hmm. Shock was rubbing against his face, having climbed down from his shoulders. You hungry, girl? Izuku's eyes widened. He hadn't eaten anything all day. Thank you for reminding me, Shock. Let's go get something to eat. An 11-year-old really should have called more attention when paid more attention when he was walking into a grocery store by himself, especially since he had always been small for his age. Here he was, though, standing in the cat food row, covered in grime and sand, with a cat sitting on his shoulder looking as though she was shopping too. How about this one, Shock? I thought I should. It should last you some time too, Izuku said, picking up the medium-sized bag off the rack. Paw, Shock put a paw on it and looked at Izuku, silently agreeing with Izuku's choice. It only cost 700 yen too, so he had enough for some food for himself. Buying water was simple enough, especially since it was a necessity. It only left him with roughly 500 yen for food, but still, that was good enough. Crawling back into the van after Crawling back into the van after a day was fairly nice, even if all he had was his backpack to keep him warm. But hey, he had something over his head, and Shock was curled up in his stomach, purring away. It might not have been a lot. It may not have been a lot, but at least being a dumpster. He wasn't being a dumpster anymore. Instead, he was living on a trash beach. Upgrades, people, upgrades. Izuku has always been one to look at the bright side of things. He was optimistic to a fault, as his mother used to say. But hey, he just needed to hold out a few more years. Maybe Maybe he could fax some minor intelligence quirk or something to get a new job when he was older. All he had to do was wait. And that was the end of chapter 1. I hope you enjoyed. And as I'm sure the author would appreciate comments and kudos if you enjoyed it. Sorry for any of my stuttering, but I hope you enjoyed. I found this photo that's on the video on Google. So yeah.